Welcome back. You're watching Credlin. Well, an Australian BBC reporter is making waves around the world after receiving a surprise call directly from a Taliban spokesman live on air. Yalda Hakim, who was born in Afghanistan but moved to Australia in the 1980s, expertly navigated the interview, which went on for about half an hour. BBC journalist,
spokesperson of the Taliban, Suhail Shaheen, on the line. Mr. Shaheen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we've just got you on the phone, so we're just going to see if we can put you on speaker. Mr. Shaheen, there is a lot of chaos and confusion in Kabul at the moment. Can you just help us understand what the Taliban plan to do at present and next?
We assure the people of Afghanistan, particularly in the city of Kabul, that their properties, their lives are safe.
BBC journalist and founder of the Yalda Hakim Foundation, Yalda Hakim herself, joins me now live. Yalda, thank you for your time. I've never seen anything like it. You quickly put the phone next to your guest microphone to capture the Taliban spokesman's audio. Were you expecting this call at all?
Well, I had been in conversations, Peter, with the Taliban as we saw Kabul crumble, really. When the Taliban started to march towards the gates of Kabul, I was in constant touch with them, trying to get information, trying to filter that information back to panicked and very frightened residents of Kabul, especially many of the young women who I know and I'm in regular contact with. They were reaching out to me, asking me, what do you know, what information can you give me? And because I had that contact with them, I was reaching out to him. So when Kabul finally fell and I woke up that morning, I had slept very little. I was in contact with many of these women through the night. And we were all quite concerned. I thought, if I sleep and then I wake up and Kabul has fallen, I just didn't want to be in that position. It was something that I didn't really want to think about. So I called him in the morning when I got a call from work. It was Sunday morning. I don't work on a Sunday. And I got a call to say, come in, you've got to present, Kabul's fallen. And I called him on my way in and I said, people are frightened, they're panicked. They don't know what's going on. The insurgents and the militants are in the city. Can you please give us more information? And so he and I were texting back and forth. And then suddenly, while I was in the middle of this interview, he started to ring and I could see it on my phone. And I thought, I've just got to take this.
When you were interviewing him, I mean, you kept your cool. I think that's admirable, and you got to the crux of the issues. I think people around the world and people obviously in Afghanistan were concerned about, the future of the government, safety of citizens, particularly women, access to education, work, all of those things. He seemed to intimate that this will be a different Taliban. How surprised were you by that sort of response? And do you believe it?
Well, look, I have spent time with the Taliban. Just 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in Afghanistan. I traveled to Doha. I spent time with Suhail Shaheen, the man that I interviewed, and then I traveled from there to Kabul. He said very similar things to me at the time in Doha, that they had made mistakes in the 90s, that this was a very different era and period of their rule. And he was hoping to see girls go back to school and university and work, and he didn't want to see brain drain within the country. I then traveled to Afghanistan and spoke to a frontline commander who told me that they would like to see public executions return. They would like to see the stoning of women who commit adultery. They would like to see the chopping of hands and feet if someone commits theft, for example. That was his example of what law and order would look like. And that he didn't think girls should go to school beyond the ages of 12 or 13. And then he sort of changed his mind midway into the and said maybe 10. And then further down along the line, he said, you know what, in my village, no girls go to school. So, it's not something we would allow. So you really see the difference between the leadership in Doha and the fighters who are fighting this battle. And I put that to Suhail Shaheen in my interview. I said, how much control do you actually have over these very hardline militants who are fighting this war for you? And he said, right now there is calm in Kabul, we have full control, and we're getting ready to arrive in the capital to enter the presidential palace.
I mean, you make a good point there that it's a very feudal society, it's a tribal society. How much control the leadership has is an open question. Of course, 5,000 Al-Qaeda and other terrorists were out of prison yesterday. They are now available to the Taliban. Were you surprised at how quickly the Afghan government fell?
I think we were all shocked. Like I said, I was there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and people were calling me from the United States. They were calling me from the UK, Australia, saying, you know, you've spent time with the military. You've spoken to the vice president of the country. What's your feeling? And I said, I don't think this government's going to fall. You know, and you just realise now sort of how naive that was. Even last week when I was speaking to analysts and the US intelligence community put out a statement and said, we think that Kabul is going to be, they're going to reach the gates of Kabul in 90 days, and they're going to take over Kabul, sort of 30 days after that. And I just they're going to reach Kabul in 30 days and take over within 90 days, so within the next 3 months. And when I was speaking to commentators, they were saying that's still quite premature, you know, where Kabul is, it looks like the whole military will sort of surround Kabul and the leadership will try to at least protect Kabul. And that was last Thursday. Within 3 days, the capital had fallen. I think everyone is in a state of utter shock right now.
There's obviously a great concern around the world for catastrophic human rights abuses and a refugee crisis. You were born in Afghanistan. I suspect you've still got family connections there. What do you make of that sort of impending crisis?
Well, you know, my family left Afghanistan when I was just 6 months old, and they were refugees, and they crossed the border into Pakistan and were lucky enough to call Australia home and move there. And I grew up in Sydney, and I often just say, you know, my heart is in Sydney. I love Sydney. It's my home. It's where my family is. It's where I grew up. But you know, I started my career in Australia, and I feel very much Australian, and I feel proud about being Australian. But I think about all of these young people who are now homeless and having to restart their lives. You know, these are many of these women that I know who I call friends in Kabul who have now left. They had very independent lives. They were living in apartments on their own, for example. They had careers. They had lives. They were TV hosts and singers and artists and musicians and activists. And, you know, some of them had body piercings and tattoos and they sang and they roamed around Kabul without headscarves. And they had the same dreams and aspirations as you and I would, or anyone would, whether they're in Sydney, London, New York, or Kabul. And so to see that now gone and for them to go and become refugees, I often say people don't want to be refugees. These people are weeping right now. These young women are weeping, not because they want to restart their lives, but they want to claim their lives again and what they've left behind.
Well, you made news right around the world. I really appreciate your time tonight here in Australia. Yalda Hakim, thank you.